So this is the PowerPoint slides that we used during the parent workshop. I'm going to put these into a booklet so that everyone had something they could look at and take home with them, but hopefully this will do. If you actually want some of the paperwork, then let me know. I can always print it off. So I think the key thing to think about as we were going through this presentation, or as we were going through this workshop, was actually a large majority of it was kind of group discussions or reflections on your own experiences, and maybe even as how they have changed over the course of maybe the season or during your child's time here at West Brom, or even just during their kind of footballing or sporting careers too. So what we asked people to do first was consider the answer to these questions as if you were your daughter. So can you think of your daughter's favourite football memory? If you know, what would the answer be if we were to ask them, my mom or dad helps me when they do what or say what, but then also I get frustrated when mom or dad does or does not do something or say something around. And again, we try to make that focus around football, and the kind of experiences kind of before, during and after training and the matches too. So I think before going any further into the workshop, it's important to kind of think about, well, what would the answers be, and then reflect on that, and how easy do you feel, or how confident as well do you feel that your answers are to what your daughter would say. And then maybe, again, as part of that, we could have looked at maybe, well, part of the discussions we have with our daughter is actually, are my answers that I've given on these 3 questions, do they actually match what my daughter says? And that maybe potentially starting a conversation with them as well around their football, and also your kind of role within their football and sport in general too. So then we looked, appreciate there's quite a lot of information in here, but we did look at kind of motivation. We just discussed how individuals are motivated. We can obviously be not motivated or amotivated. We could be motivated by things that are outside of us, external to us. So obviously in football, people can be motivated and are motivated towards success, so winning, scoring goals, winning competitions, things like that as well. But what we want to also strive towards is making sure that we also have that internal motivation as well, or intrinsic motivation it's called on there, and that we have a good balance between the two. Maybe even potentially there is a bit more strength in the intrinsic motivation. It's felt that kind of being more intrinsically motivated and focusing on, in my own, for example, in my own development, that's going to help me more with my well-being and my confidence, and again, it's going to motivate me to kind of keep on improving. So there are 3 basic needs that help us focus on that internal motivation. We've got autonomy, so basically how much say we have on things, and do we have a choice in what we do. Our competency, so our knowledge and skills on a certain area, and then our relatedness. So what relationship do we have with people? So obviously in this case for your daughters, it could be their relationships with yourselves, and with their coaches, but also their kind of knowledge on the sport, and then also what kind of say and what choices they have within that sport as well. So if they have those 3 things, as they develop those 3 things, they're more likely to be kind of motivated on their own personal development. So by experiencing these 3 basic needs of autonomy, or give them choice, competence, relatedness, they're more likely to experience volition, motivation, engagement. And by experiencing these things, they're more likely to foster an enhanced performance, be more persistent, more creative in what they're doing as well. and this relates a little bit to what we spoke about even right at the start of the very first presentation induction, where we asked you to think about how would you describe your daughter in 10 years time, and we looked at different skills and qualities that we want them to possess. Well, if we're able to kind of give them these basic needs, even related in a sport context, then we're potentially developing some of those qualities and skills that you're looking for in your daughter. Again, like persistence, creativity, the ability to reflect, to problem solve themselves, and more. So then we looked at the results of the girls, so what the girls actually said for the workshop I did with them a few weeks ago. So I've done, excuse me, so we broke it into 3 sections: before the game, during the game, and after the game. And I asked them, pretty similar to the questions you had right at the start there, what things would they like to keep that their parents do for them in terms of supporting them. I actually mentioned what they're grateful for and what do they like in terms of that keep section, and then what would they like to change that their parents do at the moment, or maybe that their parents don't do and they'd like to kind of see incorporated into that kind of support and yeah, the support that you offer as parents. So these are some of the results. Hopefully you can see them. Lots of kind of positives and what they see kind of prior to the game. So I describe that as pretty much like the moment they wake up to when they kind of out the car at the venue, ready to go out and go to the changing room, whatever. So lots of things there. Things like preparing kit, preparing food and drink, and actually driving your daughter to the game, having petrol in the car. Those are 3 big things, as well as the music actually as well. And that's a great example of where you have provided them an opportunity to have a choice. So as much as we might not like or enjoy the music that they're listening to, by us giving them a bit of choice and having a say in what they are listening to, that's going to help that relationship, but also it's giving them that autonomy, that bit of choice too. They like the encouragement and motivation and waking us up as well. And then you've got some of the things there that they could have liked to change. So as you can see, there are some things that kind of link together. So we discussed how they differ between each child, really. You've got encouragement and motivation they want to keep, but then also they're saying that, or some are saying that giving them information on what to improve on could be a bit of a mood killer, or when you're doing the pep talk, make sure you're being nice to them. But again, I think the reflection within the groups that we had were that it was, obviously that could be very individual, but we kind of said, well, how do we know what works for you and your daughter? Then we looked at during the game. Again, not some, well, actually there's probably more than I originally imagined, but these are some of the things they wanted to keep or change as well, and a lot of it was, in terms of the keep, it's things like the supportive behaviours they're seeing, like the cheering, the clapping, paying attention, and praise they're receiving during those matches. But then things they wanted to change, a lot of it, in fact, probably the biggest one was the body language, the facial expressions that they're seeing at different points in the game. But again, we kind of discussed how difficult that can be, because our body language can kind of give things away, so to speak, in terms of how we may or may not be feeling. But yeah, it's trying to be aware of that. And again, we had some parents kind of discuss how they try and work or navigate their way past that too. Paying attention to the game. Again, there's some conflicting things here. So we've got some girls saying, well, we don't want you to be on your phone, or don't want you to be linesman as much. We want you to kind of focus on me and what I'm doing in the match. And then others, we've got, actually, I like it when you stay in the car. So again, what is it that works for your daughter at the moment as well? I think that's another key point as well, is what might work now might not necessarily work in the future. And then we've got after the game. So hopefully you can kind of see some of these things, but a lot of it was focused obviously on that drive home after the match. Again, a lot of appreciation for getting food, and again for driving your daughters kind of back home. But everything else in terms of the keep and the change were very much focused on the conversations, that bit of debrief on the way home. So we've got things like going through the positive negatives we like, but then also if we're just focusing on the negatives, they want that to change. The silence as well in the car, and various other things kind of telling me I've played well when I didn't. So that might link a little bit to their competence. So they know, and they're probably very aware of whether they've had a good game or not. So look at some of those things, is that some of the girls might not like it if they've not had a good game, that you telling them actually they played well, because they might not kind of relate to that because of their competencies. They know that they don't have that, they haven't had a good game. But then also, I suppose, from a well-being point of view, if they know that they've not had a good game, how much do they really want to then focus on those negatives and what didn't go well during that game, and also during the drive home as well. But again, we talked about how that will differ from one person to another. So how can we increase autonomy in our conversations on the way home, and how can we make it more supportive? So when we talk about this autonomy supportive relationship, we're saying, what are we doing to encourage children to initiate their own behaviour? What are we doing to encourage choice? What are we doing to encourage that self-initiation? What are we doing to allow them to kind of participate in decisions? And what we're doing to kind of take the child's perspective on things as well. So all of these things I feel that could be fitted into our discussions on the way home with our daughters. And it's just think about how are we actually incorporating that. So when we're saying about autonomy and giving them choice, it doesn't necessarily have to be that we are doing everything that they want and everything that they say. It's just how do we maybe negotiate that a little bit more with them. There might be aspects, maybe not necessarily in this context in terms of the drive home. There might be other times where we might be thinking that we're actually giving them a no answer, but then we're actually explaining why you've come to that decision. So they're still participating in the decision rather than just no, and that's the end of it. So it isn't just about kind of giving them everything they want all the time, because obviously that's not possible. But then how do we incorporate these things into those discussions on the way home? So we could have reflected on that a little bit and asked people to kind of write things down and make some of their own ideas. So I think it's really important that you kind of do that yourselves, really. I will kind of give you some suggestions, but now might be a good time to try and pause it and just think, well, what would I do in relation to these slides as part of that discussion? So I'll just give you a chance to pause that now if you want to before I move on to the next slide. So we just wanted we asked the parents there at the time to reflect on what do they already do that encourages a bit more autonomy with their discussions with their daughters on that journey home. What's already in place, and what things do you think you could add to what you're already doing or change slightly? And that's obviously again key part of that kind of reflection that we asked you to do on the previous slide. So these may be some things that you are already doing or may consider on that car journey home. And at one point I raised was maybe actually the discussion needs to be before matches start, middle of the week. Like say, well, what do you like about what I do? What would you like to change? So that you've got a bit of an idea of what they like and what they get out of those discussions on the way home. But then in addition to that, I'd still say, well, the answer to that might be, well, it depends on how I performed, depends on the result. etc. So it'd still be maybe when they get into the cars, if you don't already, is maybe asking them if they want to talk about the game. You probably look in the rearview mirror and probably know if they want to talk about it or not. But again, it's always worth asking them again, because it gives them that decision, that they've got the chance to have that say on that then. And then the last 3 points there. So yeah, allowing them to take the lead. So getting them to reflect. This, we're developing a skill here by getting them to reflect and communicate kind of how they felt the game went, how they, in terms of a physical performance, but maybe even in terms of a mental performance as well. Getting them to reflect, and you're developing those skills by getting them to kind of give you feedback on how it went and why it went that way. So yeah, what you hoped you were going to do, did you do what you hoped you were going to do? And if so, why? If you didn't do that, then again, why not? So developing those reflection skills. And those are 3 questions she said she asked her children. Again, I'd say maybe to begin that would be, well, do they want to talk about it first? Again, these are just suggestions. Again, I think that's the point we made throughout, is it very much depends on your daughter's preferences. And then we did a bit of a shirt swap. So we just asked people what would they leave behind and what would they take with them. And yeah, that was pretty much the kind of PowerPoint slides that I had. But yeah, I think the key thing was obviously the discussion. So obviously, I appreciate that people couldn't be there, but it'd be great that obviously the more times that we do these, I'm hoping to try and do one more before the end of the season. If we can do that, it's kind of like large focus is going to be on group discussions. I don't want them to be kind of something you've got to sit and listen. It's actually, what are your experiences on this particular topic and what have you done and how does that work for you? So yeah, it'd be good to know what you would like to look at before the end of the season. So those people that did the feedback forms at the end, I know some mentioned and said, well, it also depends on information Dave gives you regarding the change to the ETC. There might be some discussions or workshops based around that potentially. The fact that we're coming to the end of the season. I know some parents mentioned things like balancing exams with sport as well. So yeah, any ideas that you want to kind of, please let me know and we'll try and get at least one in before the end of the season. Thank you for that. Cheers.